This is World Comics Review, and I'm looking at a small comic, so I've moved the camera closer. Imagine that, eh? What an idea. So yeah, this is Commando number 5011 from probably 2016. Yeah, I didn't look into this before, did I? 2017, right? Oh yeah, I briefly subscribed a while back. I should subscribe again, even. So yeah, this is a Flight of Fancy about Nazi flying saucers, which remain a kind of persistent conspiracy theory down the years. Yeah, Commando occasionally go into kind of a light science fiction, like about super weapons and weird stuff, but mostly their stories are pretty down to earth, although kind of like the heroes have more extreme experiences than was the typical soldier's experience in World War II, or whatever other war they're writing about. Yeah, they occasionally go into like really crazy science fiction, but this is kind of the more down-to-earth, misinterpreted type of science fiction. Nothing too weird, just a bit bizarre. So yeah, it's begins with the Nazi secret weapons that we know actually did exist, the pilotless flying bombs and the first ever ballistic missiles, against which there was absolutely no defence, and still isn't really. And if somebody built one of these today, they'd probably score a few hits. And this is the Nadelwerfer, an early kind of rocket artillery. And yeah, the Allies are fighting through Europe after D-Day. Got Colin Warner and Norman Smythe, who are ordinary soldiers, and Roger Brown, who's this guy is like a geek basically. So he identifies the sound of the Nadelwerfer and knows how far it fires. It's facts and figures like that. Quite how he got information from the German military, I don't know. See, these nerdy statements antagonise the other soldiers, and their sergeant tells him to keep it down and stop going on. And the officer thinks that it's good that he's saying all this stuff because it takes the soldiers' mind off the job they've got to do. So yeah, they're in an attack on a town. He gets wounded, and he knows some medical knowledge too, so he's like diagnosing himself. I can see in here, but I think some of my ribs are broken. Gets taken away to a unified Allied field hospital where he meets some Americans. So I come from New York. Really, I'm sorry about 1812 when we burned it down. And he keeps beating them at poker because he's worked out the odds that they've got good cards and he hasn't, based on his own hand. And then they give him some American comics, and he thinks they're really interesting. So yeah, a lot of imagination and research has gone into this. Yeah, I've read American comics from that era, and I know plenty of research went into this. Like enough research to read that month's issue of The Shadow and copy it. Don't know about how much imagination went into it, but never mind. So yeah, he starts on. He gets back to his unit and has taken a load of American comics with him and keeps talking about aliens and weird creatures and other stuff that's in the comics. Because your American comics actually had other genres back then. It wasn't just superheroes all the time. And he's still going on. Jump back to London where the V1 and V2 are going. So yeah, the V2 was basically a rocket. Nazi Germany's probably the first nation to put anything into space as we know it today, although it didn't stay there. They're going through a forest and he's talking about the Germanic tribesmen and how they fought the Roman invaders, which the other soldiers aren't too happy about because now they're invading Germany. But yeah, the Romans never saw anything like this. So more going for a battle. He gets wounded, slides down a slope to where the other soldiers can't see him, and spots a flying saucer. And is flown away by the time the other soldiers get there, and he's waffling on about seeing flying saucers and aliens, so they think he's just read too many comics and had a hit on the head. starts getting into fights with the other soldiers, and they reckon he was wounded in the head and hallucinated. Then he's drawing a picture of what happened. Some American officers happened to see it, and the Americans are actually investigating other Nazi secret weapons. They end up sneaking up on a German base. Yeah, attacking a German base, more battles. Liaising with high-ranking Americans who are investigating secret weapons. And they find a Nazi flying saucer. So it's kind of based more on helicopter principles, so a spinning bit with wings inside. Vertical takeoff and landing and things like that, so they don't need airfields to operate from, so they can go and bomb London and even New York without needing airfields to take off from, so they can just launch them from anywhere, much like the V1 and V2. The V2 especially could be launched from trucks, so there was no kind of launch sites to destroy. It could be set off from anywhere, so you never knew when one was coming, so they want to make a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft like a helicopter to do that. So he didn't see a flying saucer, he saw an extremely primitive helicopter. It probably wouldn't work in real life, of course, but yeah, they were fighting the Germans. The other soldiers have to eat their words, and making fun of him for talking about flying saucers, and there really was one, sort of. The German officers, pretending to be wounded, starts firing back. He trips over while holding a what's it called? Panzerfaust. And accidentally launches it, which blows up the flying saucer, so the Allies can't capture it and build their own ones. After the war, he sees an advert for a company that wants to make adventure story comics, so he decides to send this story to them. And yeah, that's it. Commando number 5011. Kind of a weird, light science fiction with possible dose of vaguely plausible reality. Pretty interesting one, and kind of appropriate considering the channel.